or a couple seconds late. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're on.
Yeah.
Okay, we're joined this hour by physicist Lamar Glover. Let's just get right into it. What is a physicist?
I don't know. Let's be out here doing shit. So,
So we're online. So for our audience, how would you define a physicist for those who are not familiar with the hard sciences?
is there a way for me to see what they're up to?
They're just joining right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in a second. Okay, cool.
The second one, yeah. We're live.
Where?
Go to my Facebook page. You can see it.
Mute the volume. Oh, cool.
Yeah. So the question is, what is a physicist?
So cool. You want me to answer it, or you want them to answer it?
No, I want you to answer it.
Oh,
It's an
I'm
interview.
sorry.
We're interviewing you. I'm interviewing you.
Let you ask.
Yeah, it's not a class. We're not teaching them anything.
So, like the good scientists, I don't go out there with the answer, right? I'm just waiting for basically some data to come in and for me to evaluate the data, right? That's what and the physicist looks at basically how all matter reacts with one another, right? There's like biochemistry, there's biophysics, there's physical chemistry. There's different ways where each part of one science blends into another one. But physicists have this thing basically that says like we're the most pure form of science. Every form of science that exists basically comes through us because everything that interacts is matter interacting, and we're analyzing matter. Basically, that's what we look at, right? Whether it be super small on the subatomic level, or whether it be as large as the basically galactic cluster, right? We're looking at basically the expansion of the universe and of itself in that model, right? So it's a physicist is someone who basically takes the observations of matter and basically puts two and two together and sees trends from them, right? And uses that information to basically make a educated prediction for what's going to happen next, right?
You can do that.
Yeah, you can do it too. We all could be physicists. I mean, we do it in a regular day. We were all born into a physical world, right? So there's no way we don't know what's going to happen next. All I do basically as a physicist is I basically put it in switch from English to basically math, right? You already know what it means to you live rotational inertia. You live like kinematics, right? You even live things like electrostatic and electromagnetism. Those are lived experiences you have. However, you might not have an equation in your mind when you're thinking about it, but you do know if a bowling ball is going to fall out of a bag onto your foot, you know you're going to move your foot, right? As opposed to if like a pillow fell out of the bag from the same exact height, you would move your foot, right? Because you know they're both going to fall, right? But you know that one has more mass than the other one, so the force with it is going to hit your foot is going to be very different, right? You're not doing math in your head. You're doing that based on the data you've already collected throughout your life, and then you're saying, all right, bowling balls hurt, pillows don't, right? That's your physics, right? That's everyone's physics, right? And we do that all on a regular basis. All I'm doing basically is putting Arabic symbols and like some Greek symbols and together with it so that you can put it on a graph, right? And extrapolate that data even further, right? Um, I work with young folks to basically teach them how to do the same thing, and ideally and hopefully, basically, we can all work together to expand human knowledge.
Yeah, no small thing. No big deal.
No.
So that I knew your answer was going to intimidate me. I had no idea it was going to be that intimidating. So
That's the thing.
essentially,
but it's all like I don't do anything that people can't do. Like I really don't. Like all I'm doing is basically just algebra, and people do algebra on a regular basis, right?
Mhm.
I mean, not think of it as algebra, but it's like you got to figure something out. It's some unknown thing you don't know, and you got to make plans for it, right?
Mhm.
There's no way you can be an Angelino and not do advanced math in your head, whether it be trying to get from one point of town, part of town to another before the pandemic, fighting traffic, or just trying to make rent.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
cash flow problems. So like, that's advanced math, you know. Like, and then we all do it because we have to squeeze a dollar out of a penny. And if you can do that, if you can basically you can make it work. You can get from place A to place B and make it handle your business in LA. You should have a degree in mathematics, at least an
Yeah.
associate at the very minimum. I think everyone who lived in LA for like 5, 10 years should get one.
Or this is just what you're describing just makes you sound like a weatherman of like time and space. Like you're able to just like
this is like, but I'm learning how to say it like in a number form. That's all. That's all. That's at the end of the day, that's all it is. That's it.
so so you mentioned you work with the youth. Can you describe some of that youth how you're bringing science to
Right. Over the years, it's changed. Right now, I'm working at a private school in the Eagle Rock area, into the Pasadena area, and it has a one-to-one education model. So that's really interesting. It's kind of like the Shangri-La of educational models. I literally sit in the classroom, and now I do it virtually through Zoom. And it's one student, me and them, and we basically have like 25 to 30 sessions, and we just go back and forth like one to one, and I walk them through a curriculum. Right. It has a feel of tutoring, but it's instructional because they're basically I'm not coming there to spot them to do their homework. I'm teaching them a concept and then giving them homework to do it on their own. And it gives me a lot of freedom to basically um, mold a curriculum in a way that's catered to that particular person. So you get greater outcomes, right? There's some people who really don't like tests. They see a test and they freak out, right? But they'll love to do a presentation. Give me a PowerPoint and I'll spend as much time as I need on that and make it bells and whistles and really shine, right? No matter on what it is. And some people are the opposite. They're like, I really don't want to talk to you longer than I have to because I'm very shy. However, give me a test and I'll ace that and we'll be done in and out, right? And you can really cater yourself to those folks. And the only drawback of that model is that it's not replicable on a large scale. Not everyone can do it. It's you got to have money to do it, right? Because it's a private school, and then also it's not enough teachers basically as of right now. Maybe the world's changing, and there'll be ways to improve upon that model. But right now, having a one-to-one class model, you would need more teachers basically. Um, and but where I also work is in the evenings. I work at Dominguez Hills, and I work in the Department of Physics Astronomy there. And that population is basically like the young adults, basically on average from mid 20s to mid late 20s. And there's some outliers. I have a couple of high school kids in one class. I have a couple of older men in another class as well too. And their whole thing is they're trying to basically work towards a degree, to work towards a career, to get out there and like really basically improve their outcomes in their lives, right? They've looked at the landscape of the world and they said, all right, well, I know if I get a tech degree, or a med degree, I'm gonna be in a better spot. So these are folks who are coming from our neighborhoods and taking the first step basically to basically navigate capitalism better. I don't know how else to put it, right? So some of them really like science, but a lot of them really want to be in a stable job, want to be have a stable career, and in some ways that demographic, that motivation of just, hey dog, I'm here to work, I'm here to get in and get out. What do I got to do to make this happen? That's also like in some ways it's really gratifying as an instructor because someone's really geared towards like just making it happen, getting their work done, really just kind of showing up and engaging. But the scientist in me is like, but why don't you like physics? Don't you want to switch majors? you don't you want to be an engineer, but you can be a physicist, right? And they're like, no, I don't want to be a physicist. I want to be a mechanical engineer or a civil engineer. I want to work for LADWP, like, or SoCal Gas, they're not trying to like sit here and like pontificate about, whatever, right? It's about like I'm trying to basically get into a new neighborhood, That's what I'm trying to do, right? So it's
So, so you mentioned Cal State Dominguez Hills. You talked about the teaching there. Um, this is for a wide audience. Many people not from Southern California, not from the LA area, so they're maybe not familiar with the student body at Cal State Dominguez Hills. Could you tell the audience a little bit about what is a likely student? Who's a typical student at Cal State Dominguez Hills?
uh, Cal State Dominguez Hills is melanated. It's got a lot of brown people at it, right? It's in the East Coast we have historically black universities and colleges, HBCUs, college universities. On the East Coast we have on the West Coast there's predominantly minority institutions, PMIs, right? Cal State LA is one of those. Cal State Dominguez Hills is definitely one of those. If I remember those numbers correctly, Dominguez Hills might be like 2/3 Latino, something around like 10-15% Asian, like 10% black, and like only 10% white, something like along those lines. I could have the numbers are skewed a little bit off, but I know it's a majority Latino campus. Right, most of the folks who are coming from that school are coming from basically South Central, South LA, South Bay area, and they're coming there basically. It's kind of has a regional university feel to it. So it's not a destination school in terms of people. There are people on dorms there for sure. A lot of people who go to school there are working part time, if not full time. A lot of working parents. One class I was teaching last semester, pretty much, I would say 75 or 80% of the people in that room worked full time and were going to school full time. And that's incredible, like regardless of what your major is, that's a time commitment. And then a good chunk of them were parents as well on top of that as well too. So they're like really, really, really just working hard to make something happen. Some of the hardest working students I've seen have been at Dominguez Hills. Not even like no cap. That's just what it is.
Definitely. No, I have some very good professor that I work with doing the study of capital that we do every week.
Right.
He teaches at Dominguez Hills. So I mean, Dominguez Hills is full of both the staff and student body. I mean, it's really a lot of excellence. We have a question from the audience, and let's take this question. It says, "Have you experienced any gatekeeping in the STEM world, like many have seen other fields like law and medicine?"
Oh, I mean, yeah. There's gates everywhere, right? I can give you some broad strokes to the gatekeeping, and part of the gatekeeping too is that it's like talking about it in public can be kind of hard because then like the gate really gets kept, right? So, but there's definitely been instances where there's added research into incidents where I didn't have access to a sample. I literally saw the sample I wanted to analyze, and they told me it wasn't there, and I'm looking at it, and I knew the reason why I didn't have it was because I was at that point in time I was working at not Dominguez, I was working at Cal State LA, and the school I was working at was not as prestigious as the school that I was getting a sample from, right? And it wasn't even like a sample that was so there's a bigger context to it, but it was one of those literal situations where I'm literally witnessing someone keep a gate, right? There's the thing I want, and they're telling me I can't have it. It doesn't exist, right? And I can't continue my research or do it optimally because I need that piece, right? Eventually, they gave us a piece that we wanted, but it was like a earlier model, and it was all stepped on. You know what I mean? It was just not what we really needed, right? But nonetheless, we still did work with that piece, and I actually got published as a master's student. That's something that doesn't happen every day. Now it's published in Physics Letters A, which is a somewhat just a prestigious journal to be published in. It's not the same as Nature, that's everyone's goal in life to be published there. But there's nothing to sneeze at, basically. It's like I had a really good rookie year out the gate as a scientist. But that all that aside, like that's still there. I've been in groups and meetings, international meetings, working on bleeding edge science, right? Something that's going to basically help us expand our knowledge of the universe. And there's people in the room telling me that racism doesn't exist or they don't see race, things like that. It's like cartoon stuff, I mean, like at this point in time, it's like they still make people like you, but yes, they do.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, People are like they're in charge of things, They give funding from, all kinds of stuff. NSF, NIH, NSF is not the National Science Foundation, or National Science Fund. Let me make sure I get that acronym correct. Uh, um, yeah, National Science Foundation, NIH, National Institute of Health. These people are part of groups that get like all kinds of prizes, press fruit, and everything like that. And there you are amongst them. You worked hard to get in that room to be there, and then you realize that there's racism there too. There's no place in our society where racism does not exist. There's no place in our society where gatekeeping does not exist. It's everywhere. You know?
I was gonna yeah, so for audience again, Los Angeles is a very big city. They hear Cal State LA. Those not from Los Angeles might not be aware of where that's located and the demographics that are typically there. Can you tell us a little bit about Cal State LA?
Yeah, Cal State LA is basically like a sibling school to Dominguez Hills. So Dominguez Hills is like South Bay. If you had a big picture, LA is like a rectangle, right? Down here where my thumb is kind of like South Bay, right? And maybe it's this finger, right? Because it's a mirror image, right? So there's Long Beach, right? And everything like here. Here's Dominguez Hills. If you go up the road a bit, right there is downtown LA. And close to downtown LA, just a little east of it, not very far, is Cal State LA. And Cal State LA is also a brown college. It's a predominantly minority serving institution. I'm not sure the demographic breakdown there is, but I know it's mostly Latino, a lot of Asian folks, a lot of Black folks. Basically, I think the smallest demographic would be white folks, if I remember correctly. I could Google it, but basically, it's an institution that serves people of color, right? Both campuses do. And basically, that's where I've cut my teeth as a scientist there. And I was able to become a published scientist at Cal State LA. I was able to teach at Dominguez Hill, you know. Yeah.
So for our audience, just so my mother went to Cal State LA. My aunt went to Cal State LA. Two of my cousins went to Cal State LA.
Mhm.
Cal State LA is located about 2 miles from the house I grew up in. So
Right.
that's where Cal State is. It's on the east side of Los Angeles. It's kind of where El Sereno and City Terrace meet. So that's kind of
Right.
what it's like.
Yeah, it's
Um,
such a free place where the 5, the 710, the 101, not the 101, but the 10, they all kind of meet really close there.
yeah,
It's by Luminarios with the view.
yeah. My aunt managed the McDonald's that's right off the seven, right off
Oh,
the 710. Yeah. Man, I want people
oh,
to get a real good idea of where this is. I was baptized about 2 miles away from where Cal State LA is. So I mean, Cal State LA is a place that it's located in the east side of Los Angeles, and it's a place that has a lot
right.
of significance to people in that area. Most of Cal State LA people that they were born.
Yeah. Most of them live in the area, but also too, a lot of them commute very far as well. Some of them commute all the way from the IE or Antelope Valley, Lancaster. I've seen people have traveled far to be there. Well, various reasons. It's definitely a place to be. And one of the things that's great about that campus is that it basically, I like the kind of the alumni network that comes out of there because it's kind of low key. You have all the USC's and UCLA's of the world who really like put it across their chest and like have the bumper stickers and they beat up your head with it. But there's when you mentioned that you went to Cal State LA, no matter what room you go into, there's someone there who has that connection to that place too, and the shared experiences, and it means a lot. It's a lot of us out there, a lot, a lot.
Yeah, and Cal State LA's got those alumni meetings at City Hall. You've been one of those?
No, I have not been one of those.
My mom's a Cal State alum. She always sneaks me in, and I always go there. It's great hors d'oeuvres. It's really,
That's
it's pretty
cool.
good. It's pretty fancy. I like it. Okay, so you were on Netflix.
Yes, I was on Netflix.
Tell us about your experience of being on Netflix.
So I don't. I'm a shout out to Raymond, right? Raymond's like the unofficial. I call him the unofficial mayor of El Sereno, right? You probably know Raymond. If you don't know Raymond, you've been around him. You're like literally like 1 degree away from him in like multiple directions. But Raymond hits me up one day, and he's like on Facebook. He's like, "Yo, you did a really good job in that documentary." I'm like, "What documentary?" So I was like, he was like, "Yeah, you were in this documentary about flat earthers, and you had a really good point." And I was like, "What?" So then I go in my mind and I rewind about like a year and a half before that moment, right? So that moment, a year and a half ago, before that, he told me that I went to do a talk at this thing called Astronomy on Tap. I knew some folks who were like Caltech postdocs, and they were running the program, right? And they're like, "Hey, do you want to do a presentation? Like, just get on there and like talk about some of the work that you're doing at Cal State LA, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I also want to talk about kind of like dismantling the scientific superiority complex. Just putting my work that I'm doing in a context of the fact that it's a bunch of brown kids over here doing stuff and getting published, right?" Um, and so so we do that, and there was a documentary there at the same time. And this is L.A. So L.A. If I had a dime every time someone came in the room with a camera and a waiver, I would have a lot of dimes, right? So not you just sign these things because someone's working on a film project or they have an ambition, and they would need like B real or whatever. And it's just like I just signed it. It wasn't a big deal. So I was like, oh, someone's doing a documentary on flat earthers. This will be on YouTube one day. So I signed the thing and I let it be. And I had no idea it was going to blow up. And it blew up. I still to this day get hit up about it. People hit me up on like, particularly on LinkedIn, and talk to me about basically what I said in that documentary. And it's what I said is basically a testament to the fact that there's not a lot of activists or activism or folks who are like socially aware in those spaces of science. What I said wasn't very. I don't feel like what I said was that mind blowing. You know what I mean? I feel like what I said was basically speaking truth to power, and then basically letting people know that they're not that special, right? And that so in the documentary, they kind of do a really cool job of humanizing flat earthers. They kind of follow them around and like get in their social networks and like figure out who's who. There's like love interest stories, there's like villains and there's protagonists. And then you get this scene where you get these moments where you realize that they not only do they create a community amongst themselves, they're taking L's. They lose people from outside of their community to be part of this community, and that's when my comment came in about the fact that like we're losing potential scientists, right? Since science, I didn't go into detail about this because when I did this presentation, I was talking more about my research with LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, as relates to County LA, and the bigger concept of basically opening up access to more people in the film world of science, right? I wasn't really trying to zone in on flat earthers, um, but uh, but basically what I was saying, what I said about them was the fact that they are a missed opportunity for future scientists, right? If I had to go in further into that, expound upon that, I think it's the fact that science is taught dogmatically, right? We're just taught Newton's second law. Newton has three laws, right? And the second law is F equals ma, and that says force equals mass times acceleration. And why is that the case? Don't worry about it. It's on the test. Just plug and play, right? If someone tells you like how many planets there are, when you were growing up there was 9, and now there are 8, right? And Pluto has not changed. Pluto is something that's been there for billions of years and has not changed at all in the scheme of basically when we first detected it to where it is now. But the way we think about it changes, right? And that's part of the issue with science in general is that if you teach, if you spread your knowledge in a kind of like a dogmatic way, and you don't see the pushback on it, you're going to have issues like this, right? The fact that there's not more scientists engaging with the flat Earth community to me is basically saying like it's like having a basic It's like just like you have a room in your house and you know it's messy and it's like a raccoon living in it and you don't want to do anything about it, so you just close the door and say that room's just a bad room and I'm not going to ever go there. And if one goes there, that suits them, right? So it's I don't I don't think that's the way to do it, and I think that metaphor is probably problematic and unfair to raccoons, you know. So, but I think you get the idea, you know. What I mean, like we can't um we can't just throw away people, right? Sometimes we can walk away with them and come back to them, right? But we just can't throw them away, right? And for every person that's a flat earther out there, there's going to be some people who are kind of questioning, right? And it's important that not only do you speak up, but also speak up with love and compassion and validation. Validation is really important too, because the reasoning and logic that got people to question science in the first place is not a bad form of questioning and logic, right? There's legitimate reasons to question science. Science has been used as a tool of oppression since the age of phrenology, right? We can go through the history of America and point to science being used to oppress people of color, right? All the way to the 90s with the bell curve. You know, like it's not like it's not a this is not like a thing that doesn't happen. You know,
Yeah, I mean, as late as the '70s, there were still, what do you call it? Still practicing eugenics. They're still no
right?
mas babies. They were still sterilizing women
Sterilized
without. Yeah, yeah,
women.
yeah. Uh, so I mean, yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, like we can look at historically. I mean, I think the biggest examples that are part of like kind of the public consciousness of communities of color, or black and brown people really. I mean, are the examples of the Tuskegee experiment,
Right,
the fact that they were spraying Mexican migrant workers with DDT on the border. And these things are in living memory. But I think the biggest one that probably we all are aware of is smallpox blankets. I mean, giving Native
right,
Americans blankets with smallpox. I mean, so the 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 horrific things that the U.S. government has done to people they find for whatever one other reason or another undesirable or whatever or whose lives are expendable. I
right,
mean, it colors your perception.
right. And that reminds me of right before we were born, there was the spraying of LA with malathion, right? And people's reaction to it, like it's interesting when you go back on it and look at it and like how it was recorded in history. I teach biology, so one of the things we're talking about is basically human interaction with ecosystems, and the DDT comes up because DDT was used to kill mosquitoes. It was first introduced in World War II, from my knowledge, and it was great. It totally kills mosquitoes and it kills everything. So like so that's kind of the problem with it, right? And then you get basically biomagnification, where like it's a little bit in this thing, but a bigger thing eats the little thing, and then all of the DDT gets basically clumped up in that. And as you get higher up in the food chain, the apex predators have like a whole basically a collection of DDT within them, and that was when the bald eagles were coming up with the eggs that were just all messed up. And then on top of that, it's like, oh, we're just going to spray this on people, right? That was totally happening. And malathion was used to kill the Mediterranean fruit fly, right? And science was like, well, this is not as bad as this is not DDT. So this is DDT. This is malathion, right? Malathion is nowhere near as bad, right? It's actually we use a whole lot less of it, a different chemical. It does a really good job getting rid of these fruit flies. If we don't get rid of these fruit flies, we're going to lose the whole entire crop. And California is the breadbasket of America, if not arguably a good chunk of the world, right? So we got to make sure we get rid of these flies. Um, and people pushed back on it, right? And they were basically making it seem as if the people who were pushing back on it were crazy hippies, as opposed to the fact that there's like literally centuries of just poisoning of people on a mass scale in America, from smallpox blankets to the DDT spraying on farmers to ski experiment. There's like people aren't there's a lived memory of all this stuff. So when you do something that you feel like is not threatening and you don't bother to acknowledge all that history, then you're going to come across as opposition, right? And it's easy to paint people as kooky in that situation, but you're literally going around the whole. There's videos of people was literally spraying huge swaths of LA with helicopters. Some areas got sprayed more than a few times with this malathion, right? And yeah, it's just it's an incredible thing to think about, you know. And this is the type of thing that basically is the breeding ground for conspiracy theories, in my opinion. Is when science does stuff that's just basically just rude and doesn't bother to explain itself. And then the worst thing science does too is that when it basically changes its tactics, basically acknowledging what it was doing before it was rude, right? But doesn't explain itself. Like for example, we no longer spray malathion anymore. They developed a program where there's fruit flies basically are bred. The state of California, I'm not sure who exactly breeds them, but someone's breeding a bunch of fruit flies, and they breed sterile males. So the sterile males go out into the public. They meet female flies. They basically fertilize the eggs, but the eggs do not hatch because they're sterile, right? And that's a way of basically cutting down the fly population, right? And that's a smart way to do it, and it involves zero pesticide, right? Um, but when you do stuff like when you change your tactic like that, and you don't acknowledge the fact that I'm doing this basically not, not because what I was doing was before was necessarily wrong, but I didn't bother to actually explain what I was doing or acknowledging my own past wrongdoings, right? Even if it wasn't me, scientist A, it was my predecessors that did it, right? If I'm not acknowledging that history of it, then you're going to get stuff like this, you know? And yeah, the misinformation is out there and it's rampant. And I call them all like false prophets, like people who want to just get on there and for attention and talk and say
Well,
whatever they feel.
I want to talk about those individuals in a minute, but for first, there's been a recent thing with or there's been these articles that come out in recent years about how AI, artificial intelligence, is quote unquote becoming racist, almost as though like uh, eventually you read the article and eventually gets the fact that it's the programmers who are racist, right? But the way they write the headlines, it tends to say like artificial intelligence is becoming racist for some reason, right? And I
Right.
think that like as a scientist, I mean, you have to see. I mean, well, what
Right.
is your take on the fact that AI is quote unquote becoming racist? Let me just put it that way.
A good example of this is like, yeah, it's just biased. It's like who's programming what, who's getting the jobs, where are they working, who's doing it. Mostly men, mostly white people, right? Mostly white men. A good example of this, and as anyone who's like as dark as me can attest to this, right? Is the light sensor for the hand soap dispensers, right? They're garbage. You can't put your hand in like this. You gotta put your hand in like this, right? You have to use the light side of your hand. If you put the dark side of your hand in, it won't recognize it, right? The reason being they use a photoreceptor, right, to recognize when the light is changed, right? And light just reflects off of surfaces, right? So basically, the light changing from basically the shadow underneath the the soap dispenser to when you put your hand in, it's not sensitive enough to basically detect basically brown skin. It's sensitive enough to basically detect white skin. They tested this all on a bunch of white hands, and they didn't have any black hands to test it on, right? So basically, you can't put your hand in on the black hand side underneath a soap dispenser because it won't work, and that's just because a bunch of white people made this machine, right? There's not so much that the dispenser itself is racist. It's the fact that the people that made it, who made the parameters for basically the change in the photoreception, their parameters were only sensitive enough for white people, not other people. You know, and
Yeah,
that goes basically across the board. I mean, everything.
everything's a
Um,
quantitative extension of that.
right. It's
Yeah,
like that saying amongst coding, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. Right. If you're not included as part of the thought process of coding, right, you're not going to be part of the outcome, right? So, yeah,
All right, so let's get to the false prophets now. So the people you're calling false prophets. So I mean, what attitude should people who are invested in science, who are invested? I mean, like I'm not a physicist like you, I'm nowhere, but I do believe in or organizing your life around science. Like for me, that means like if you put your hand on the stove and it burns, don't do it again, right? So I
right.
I believe organizing my life around science. So for
That's
those who
the
believe
science
in,
experiment.
yeah,
It's
for
the
those
same
who believe
function.
in organizing their lives around science and being logical and rational and trial and error, etc. How should we interact with people who are very concerned or interested in talking about the 5G vaccine?
The 5G vaccine is like this like Voltron formation of a bunch of ideas put into one. And like sometimes the hard part of all those things is like breaking it all down, right? Like it was the vaccine, the RFID chip, the 5G, all this stuff all at once, right? Um, and then somehow throw in a touch of xenophobia so you can be racist towards Chinese people, right? It's like it's a lot going on with that one right there. There's a term I can't remember the name of the term, but it's basically when someone has an argument and they spam you with a bunch of bad ideas or bad arguments, and you have to basically spend so much time breaking down one aspect of it, you can't get to the other nine. And the 5G vaccine thing is like that, right? I could literally spend like half an hour just talking about inverse square law, talking about electromagnetic spectrum, basically how frequency and the wavelength are basically come together to all, and the speed of light and all these things, right? To really hash that out. But and I'd love to do that, but I don't think that's what people want. They don't want me to get up here and just do a bunch of numbers and equations, right? Because that's what you don't trust. You don't know me, and you're definitely not going to trust a bunch of me writing a bunch of Greek letters and a bunch of equal signs, and that tells you that I'm right and you're wrong, right? The reason people hold on to stuff in the first place is that they do not trust what they are being told, and they have a very good right not to trust what they're being told. I mean, I don't that's the number one thing they have to acknowledge with all that is that when someone's questioning things and they subscribe to this theory, is that they believe that they've been lied to. And this is something I told a lot of liberal people a lot is that we get lied to all the time, and we just we normalize it. Like I could always talk about how Trump lies all the time, right? It's super duper easy, right? But I say to people, generally, if you don't like Trump, you have some part of your heart that you empathize or sympathize for Obama with, and Obama totally lies. Totally lies. The biggest lie he did to us, I mean, the biggest, not most impactful. And I don't want to get into like he did a lot of lying, right? He's a president. He lied a lot, right? The thing that was the most impactful, like wow, you just did that lie that sticks with me, was the Flint water crisis when he got on TV, had a glass of water, drank it, said this is from Flint, Michigan, and it's clean, and the water crisis is over. It's been resolved. And to this day, Flint does not have clean water, right? So, but he got on TV and said he did, and if that's the person we all people like got T-shirts of and hope and change and widow marches for, and people love this person, right? And he's bold faced lying to you, right? And you know that's a lie, right? If you ask someone right now on the street, does Flint, Michigan have clean water? They'll say no, not to my knowledge, right? There's programs, there's things happening that, and the other, but overall, the infrastructure is still messed up, right? From my knowledge, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, because I think if they had clean water, I'd have known about it by now. Last time I checked, they did not, right? But definitely when he said they had clean water, they did not have clean water. Now, if Obama was here and joined the chat right now, I'm sure he would obfuscate and have sort of like, well, actually, what I meant was this, and if you think about this way and that way, and then like, yeah, so it was clean, and I didn't lie. But at the end of the day, he lied, right? We get lied to all the time, right? And if you can't trust what you're told and you don't trust the source of information, then that makes it really hard. Scientists do not have inroads with people, period. Much less, they're not good with people, right? They don't have a really good, basically PR anything, right? And then on top of all of that, they definitely don't have inroads to basically communities of people who are marginalized or oppressed, and they just don't. So if you can't just beat someone over the head with dogma saying I'm right, I'm a scientist, bow down to me and my wizardry, look at me and my math, right, and expect them to appreciate that or respect that. Some people will, like a lot of people who I don't want to diss anyone's religious practices, but like a lot of us practice certain forms of spirituality in a very dogmatic way. We're told to do something, we do it because we're told to do it, and we do it, and it might benefit us in a lot of good ways, but nonetheless, we're not really doing it with any great critical thought behind it, right? And it's the same way when people accept science in their life, you know, tell you that,
So being
it,
an advocate for science, being an advocate for science, being a promoter of the sciences, being a promoter of science is an art, not a science.
right. So
So
doing
it's, yeah,
science, but like being a promoter of science and being an advocate of science is an art. Because like my knowledge and my background from before I got involved in science is what informed my engagement with the science community and being an ambassador for it. Right. I That whole scene in Netflix would not have happened if I didn't spend times on Crenshaw and in Lamar Park at Project Glow. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for all the Thursdays I spent, Saturdays I spent that juice, the time I spent at Chuco's Justice Center, the time I spent all the other places. Like I wouldn't have said those words would not have come out of my mouth. And those words don't come out of other scientists' mouths because they're not out there doing the work or never did it, right? They don't have that perspective, right? So like it's yeah, and I didn't say all scientists, because there are definitely some scientists out there who have that, who are sympathetic and do have that, but they have their stories. I'm sure may not look the same as mine, but they'd be unique and fascinating, and they would probably be a little bit atypical, what basically the traditional path when it comes to becoming a scientist, particularly a scientist in an elite institution with elite. When I say elite, I mean basically gatekeeping access to resources and knowledge. So.
yeah. For those not familiar, can you tell our audience a little bit of what Project Blow is?
So Project Blow basically was the longest running open mic in America for a while. It was the birth spot of a lot of great talent. And it was basically something that it was it was a successor of the Good Life Cafe. Um, Basically, it was incubated by it's a lot of history behind it. I could just go on and on about it, but like Ben Caldwell, who's an artist and runs Chaos Network, and it's a space. He's one of the few people that have actually owned property in Lamert Park in that kind of arts district area right there. Before downtown LA had his own arts district, you had Road Stage, you had Chaos Network, you had other things. Fifth Street Dicks right over there. Basically, it was the heart of black art in Los Angeles for a while, and still is to this day. They have Lamert Park Art Walk. I want to say I don't want to get the Sunday wrong. I want to say it's like second or third Sunday of the month. Maybe it's the fourth Sunday of the month. Um, but yeah, anyway, Ben Caldwell's there and he's doing his thing. Basically, the people that run in Good Life Cafe, it's open mic, and they people are doing that, and there's like this whole influence of LA underground hip hop styles come out of there, and they want to continue it, so they go down the road just further, a few blocks down Crenshaw, and it's there. People coming out of there is like LA Cool, Freestyle Fellowship. There's a lot of folks that came out of that. Medusa, Five Footers. Some of these people were also part of. A lot of people were also part of Good Life Cafe. So yeah.
So Ben Caldwell, definitely an LA legend. You've also, when you come to
What was that? I'm sorry.
Ben Caldwell, definitely an LA legend.
Hmm.
People know him here. You also worked with another legend of Los Angeles when you came to LA in the arts, Judy Baca and Spark. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Judy Baca. It's ironic. It's one of those wonderful things about life. So there's this book. Hold on one second. I think I have it on my bookshelf. I'll be right back. Uh, yeah. So this book right here. So this book, the first time I saw this book was my mom was going back to college, making face, making soul, and she was going to Rutgers Newark, and I remember looking at that cover. It was like, wow, this artwork is amazing, right? This was when I was in high school, senior year, right before I went to college, and it was it just really stuck out to me. And the cool thing about that is, I literally 5 years later, I moved to LA, and then I'm working at Spark, and I'm helping Judy and Deborah basically run a machine that's making prints of that artwork and selling it right to other people. And it's just one of those beautiful things about life. You just never know, like when something hits you, when you'll have your time or your moment to really engage it. You know, when I first saw that, I remember like thinking it was a really powerful piece, and I had no idea the power behind it. You know, there's one thing to know, like to see a piece of art and say that's impactful art, but it's another thing to be around the artist and like and see that in close hand. And it was great. You know, it was really great. And it was my introduction into basically quote unquote the community. Some of those people who I met there I'm still in the cipher around them and their energy as well till this day. You know, um, it's just amazing stuff. But she's basically a muralist, and her claim to fame is making some big murals. The biggest one, actually the biggest one in the world, is the one basically gives a history of Los Angeles. It's up in the Tahunga Wash, and it gives it's incredible. It's long, it's big, and it goes all the way from like pre-colonization to like I want to say like the 70s or 60s. Um, but yeah, it's amazing stuff. She did a world mural that was like traveling on canvases, if I remember correctly. Tons and like her art space basically to this day is still a space where people can go and do all kinds of cool things with art. And the mother of my children did an exhibit there at one point in time, and other artists have as well too. It's really cool space. You know, you can do really cool things there. People have done really cool things there. Um, but yeah, it was. I've been blessed that as I've gone through LA and engaged in LA, I've been very blessed to be amongst some really impactful and incredible people, and Judy Baca definitely is one of them.
You know what? What I'm really, mm, what I really admire, and what I'm really glad, I'm really, happy that you're out there in the world doing, is that you really are invested in this process of demystification of
Right.
things, right?
Yeah.
And I myself, you know, I I've accomplished a lot in the kind of concept of the humanities. I'm like a trained Marxist. I've been like in Marxist study circles for years. But science to me is just like I hear what you said in the beginning, and my mind just washed over because even still, I am still mystified by the idea of science. That's just not that. Oh, that's something I don't do. That's too much. I can do algebra a little bit in geometry, but anything beyond that is I don't do that. I don't know how to do that. That's all like a mystery to me. I'll never get it. Blah blah blah. Mind shuts off, right? And
Right.
so I that even people who succeeded in other fields, other things to them are just they feel like they can't do it. I myself feel like I can't do it. I myself hear you say you can be a physicist, anyone can be a physicist. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not a physicist. You're a physicist, as though being a physicist is like a magical identity, right?
No,
And
it's
so
at all.
it's not. So can you speak to that? Like the fact that you opened up saying anyone can be a physicist.
Right. So the way I became a physicist was not everyone can just walk into certain doors, right? Some doors are basically hard to get to. I couldn't go in there. I had basically an undergraduate degree in cultural anthropology from on the back east, right? I can't just go to any school and say, "Hey, I want to get into your master's physics program," right? I couldn't walk up to USC or UCLA and do that. However, I could do that at the Cal State level, right? I said I got letters of reference, and I said I'm willing to even do an extra year where I basically do all the undergraduate level courses and then work my way up to graduate level courses. And I did that. So what normally would have been like a 2 year program was 3 years for me, right? So I had an unrelated bachelor's degree, but I was a professional. I had letters of rec from like lawyers and doctors, people that, academia. So that's an adult. Well, that's someone I respect. They have a degree, whatever. They're a professional, right? So I played their game. I got the right people to write the letters, who were awesome people. No shade to this to them, but I couldn't get like. I don't think a doctor is more of or a lawyer or a business owner is more responsible than like a homemaker or someone who's like an artist or a dancer, someone who basically runs things in a different way. But I knew that going into a place like that, I'd have to basically get those type of letters of reference, right? So I did that, and then I was there, and I just showed and proved, and it worked out, and it worked out really well. And everyone can do that. Like literally, the I hadn't taken the calculus course since high school, and that was when Bill Clinton was president, right? And I had by the time I got back into school, it was 2014, right? And I had to learn things on the fly, but we have the internet now, so it was a whole lot more resources than I've been used to when I was going to school, right? With that being said, like I did it. I did it. I went in there with basically I wanted it to happen, and it can happen. And I wasn't the only person that came in there. In my cohort, there was at least like two or three other people. Um, no, there was definitely three other people I can think of off the top of my head who basically had similar stories. Where like, you know what, I was doing this. One person was running a hostel in Thailand. Another person was a traveling musician. Another person was from Canada, was doing security and different odd service jobs, and then moved out to California to be by his father. Right, these people were all in my program at the same time as I was, and they all worked together, and we all worked together, and we all got degrees, you know, and yeah, and it wasn't like it's we're good at math, but like you cannot be an Angelino and not be good at math. That's my thing, like people tell themselves they're bad at, and this is the thing about science too. Science likes scientists like being honored and like being viewed as mystics. They like it. Who doesn't like coming in a room and then being, oh, I'm a physicist. Ooh, whoa, whoa. It's like like it feels good. When someone looks at you and says, "Wow, you do a thing I can't do." I appreciate and respect that, but it but it's just not true. They people can be physicists. People already are physicists. They can't move through physical space without doing physics in their mind. And all we're doing as teachers is basically telling them how to do it with like how to add an equation to what you already know, right? And then building upon that physical model of like things at a Newtonian scale, and then going big and going little, right? That's it. And like if like it really at the end of the day is like the only way we're really going to make more scientists of color is the fact that we really start just making them ourselves, right? And because we can't rely on folks basically to open up doors and do that for us, right? And the first thing we need to do is basically realize that we actually can be scientists, and like not the same way like oh, I can run a marathon, or like or I can be a vegan. I know some people are vegans and some people run marathons. I get that, but like sometimes people put things in their mind that are like beyond, right? And like I think being a scientist is like up there with those things, like running a marathon, being a scientist, being a raw vegan. My roommate eats raw vegan pretty much predominantly. I see it manifest and see it's people do it all the time. It's very doable. You can do it. It's delicious, by the way. So like it's just thoughts.
Well, I think that I mean that, but it's so important because I mean I don't know about your experience has been, but I can name all the different experiences every time you do something when you're like living in the quote unquote life of the mind. If you come from a community whose intelligence is constantly questioned, you can't escape it as an individual. It doesn't matter. It's always going to rear its head. Even if you're even if you're like able to like break through these barriers,
Hmm.
uh, these barriers reassert themselves. So we can't, as individuals, escape this. We have to escape it collectively. I mean, it has to be fought collectively.
Right. Right. There's no like, and one of the collective ways of doing that basically is it starts with conversations like this, and I think and actively engaging with love, based in love, with the people who have like fears around it, ranging from I can't do it to basically the 5G vaccine stuff. You're not going to make an impact with anybody. Like we're not going to make any more brown scientists, black and brown scientists, if someone gets up there and has a couple of actually really smart questions about how like electromagnetic radiation works, and they came to a couple of incorrect conclusions, and we dismissed them as crazy and no one engaged them, right? Sometimes, to a certain extent, you have to know what your patience and your capacity is. And there's definitely been people who I've actually, when I'm having a mental capacity, it reaches my limits. I'll distance myself from folks, but and I've tried my best to like really be patient, particularly with people who I actually have a bond with. I'm not going to throw someone away who I actually know and share moments with in like real life, because social media can make things seem. Social media distorts reality to a certain extent. Like for example, on my page, I have nearly like 3,000 friends. But do I really have 3,000 friends? I don't think I have 3,000 friends. I don't think anyone really has 3,000 friends. I think people have 3,000 people. What's that?
How many people you got on LinkedIn?
Probably a few hundred. But do I really have a few hundred colleagues that are gonna hook me up with a job or like really network or look out for me and promote me? Nah, it's just a way of keeping tabs on your network.
Weren't you on a
That's
commercial for LinkedIn?
Yes, I was on a commercial for LinkedIn. Yeah, and I was on billboards, and it was a big deal. It was a good experience. I want to give a shout out to Ileana and Christian for the opportunity. Um, and yeah, it was really cool. It was cool because it was that recognition of being a scientist, and like family from all over the nation got to see that, and billboards and bus stops all across it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And my mom was proud, grandma's proud, class, people I went to high school with proud, everyone was proud. Um, but yeah, because ironically enough, though, that moment in my life was a really hard one when I took that picture. So that's like, it was those rough times. But yeah,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
I love the general message about the fact that we need to we need to work hard to get to do things at a high level. I mean, that's just that's science, but we can do it, and it's doable, and it's we the step one is just demystifying these things. I mean, just to
right,
really, and I myself have a mysticism around the concept of science, but this
right,
conversation is very is eye opening for me. I mean, like it's possible. I don't think I'm gonna do it because it takes a lot of time to do what I do, but like so like I really
we need poets and we need people out there saying what you're saying, and then we really need that. And if there's like, yeah, it's we need it. It's appreciated and it's valued and it holds a space. If there's no master deal, then like who fills up that vacuum, right? I don't know. I don't have any nominees right off the top of the head. You know, because what you do has a certain brand to it and a certain space and a niche to it as well. The people just can't come in and be you. You know what I mean? So yeah, we all have our place in the movement where basically we could add on and move things forward. Um, I've been asked to basically make a video kind of debunking the 5G stuff. But the more I think about it, all the video would be basically is me giving a physics lesson. And I'm not convinced that people really want a physics lesson. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's the I don't think that's the solution, in and of itself. I think it's about making relationships with people who have those doubts and those fears and have those beliefs, and then basically building up from there, and by getting their trust, and then showing them what you know, right? And also validating what they already do hold on to as true. So, like, if some, no, I don't think there's a single conspiracy theory I've come across where I thought was 100% wrong, right? A lot of them are framed in things that are real dynamics. Some of them are just amazing to me how they miss the obvious. Like for example, all the ones about Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates wants to like do some new world order and like he wants to get rid of people and this that, and the other. It's like all of Bill Gates' behavior can be explained by the basic fundamental tenets of capitalism. He's a capitalist, right? Like he wants the markets to be stable. What stabilizes markets? Pandemics. Okay, how can we get rid of pandemics? Vaccines. Boom, right? So like you don't have to dig deep into like these dots. You know,
so
to, he's a capitalist. Capitalists
yeah.
don't want to, yeah. Yeah, he wants you to have a vaccine so you can stay at work. So like, why you know? Like,
Or yeah, and don't violate my fucking Microsoft laws. Um,
right?
so question about the markets, and a final question I'll put to you, and then we'll close with some plugs and stuff.
Okay.
Um, the why is it that a market system cannot produce the goods and necessities necessary in this health pandemic?
Okay.
Why
One,
haven't
it
they?
can. Well, it totally can. It hasn't. Right now, if you go down, one of the most beautiful things I've seen right now is you go down Huntington Drive, you see people, everyone's got masks on, right? They didn't get them from the store because stores aren't selling them right now. There's like a whole economy of people just making masks, right? My mother and my children, she has masks for sale. If you look up Cha Cha Covers on IG, she's got her website as well too. You can buy some from her. But there's a bunch of other people that selling them as well. Everyone I'm sure who's listening right now probably knows somebody who's made a mask or is making a mask themselves, right? So it's not so much that our society doesn't have the infrastructure to do it, and that's just regular people, right? We somehow, in a span of like a matter of weeks, we found ways to basically protect ourselves when we had to, right? Now, if we can do it, corporations have more capacity to do that, right? There was talk about some places. I don't want to mess up the details of this. So I think it was GE as a factory wanted to convert from making one thing to making ventilators, and that just didn't happen, right? And then Elon Musk was supposed to donate a bunch of ventilators, but they just turned out to be CPAP machines, like the stuff you use to stop your sleep apnea stuff. It wasn't quite a ventilator. It was like, dog, you're like Lex Luthor. Like, what are you doing? He's just get that.
Plastic.
Like, yeah, it's just like. But anyway, he fixed it afterwards. So in defense of him, I don't know. Whatever. Look, that was what happened at first, and then it got fixed. But whatever. My point basically being is that if they want to, they can. They just don't. Right. We got Harvard basically being pressured to give back their small business loan. Right. This is how ridiculous the times are that we're in right now. It's like Harvard, Harvard, Harvard is like old money looks at Harvard and is like, damn, you're rich, right? Harvard has like what? How many $1 billion in their endowment? Like it's just
World's largest. World's largest.
yeah, it's like, and you're taking up small business loans from other people in the Boston area. Like, okay, all right, whatever. That's the thing. That's what you do, all right? But we can do it. The reason we don't do it is that what we're seeing right now is this like all the memes that are out there about late stage capitalism. I mean, they're all funny and everything like that, but it's really true. Capitalism is just it's like it's not working. It's just not working at all. This is like it. You got the mayor of Las Vegas like saying the craziest things just because of capitalism. She's going to turn her citizens of her city into a control group to see what it's like if you don't do social distancing and the shelter in place. Like it, the only motivation for any of that is basically they want the service employees back to the hotel so people can go there and but it doesn't even make any sense because who's actually going to go to Vegas? There's no one going to Vegas. No one's going. There's all these things that just don't really make sense. And some of the things that don't make sense is that it reminds me a lot of World War One, of when we stepped into the industrial age, and there was the first like big war amongst industrial powers, and they were just using all their old war tactics with their new toys, and they were just decimating tons of people, and they weren't. There wasn't people. Just it was just murder. It was mayhem, and like I feel like right now is something not that macabre, but like we're trying to do old capitalist things in a dynamic in a world that these things just don't work. It literally took one pandemic, one bad cold virus, one coronavirus, basically for us to go laughing at Yang to basically Trump jacking his idea, right? Like it took a matter of like less than like 2 months for that to happen. So I don't know what the new normal is going to be, but I do know that capitalism has failed once again. But I don't know if it's enough to put it. Is this a knockout punch for it? Do we take a step towards socialism now? A further step towards socialism. I don't know. People are pretty stubborn. We got people who really don't want to stay at home. We got people opening up beaches, opening up schools, opening up all kinds of businesses again. So it's hard to say. I don't know.
I put this question to several guests about why a market system is failing um, people, right? Or why the market system fails to produce the things, and
Right.
And what I really like about your answer is it's separated um, industrial production, from a capitalist market. Like these are separate questions. I mean, a
Yeah.
factory, no matter how things are produced, that's science. The other
Right.
stuff is how society is organized, the organization of society, as distinct from the scientific capacity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the factory can make this stuff. Like, we could have masks. There's literally we have a whole like fashion district down the street from us right now. We could, if someone said, if there, we had a strong leadership and was about it, and it could really move people, we could have tens of thousands of masks every single day, and do that till we have millions of masks. Like, but that requires people to be competent and leaders and like motivators. And we don't live in that, and actually have resources behind it to make that happen, right? If we treat this as if it was a war effort, we're fighting coronavirus. We need everyone to have masks. You can go to your post office and pick up a free mask, right? Nah, but instead we got people fighting over trying to get actual fabric because fabric can't be found anymore because all the ports have been closed, and we've basically become so dependent upon production from China that we don't have these things. But we could have these things. It's not so much the capacity of industry. We have the capacity when we want to, if we wanted to. It's just if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. So people aren't working towards that right now, right? So as long as it's money before people, then yeah, that's the failing. And there's no money. The money that can be made right now is not. It hasn't lined up yet, and also the market and things like that move slower than they should. If if we had an economy that basically firefighters or paramedics were based on like profit margins, like a lot of things would just burn down and people would just die because there's no money in it.
Well, in the 1800s, they were in New York. I mean, the firefighters were privately funded, and they would, that would happen, and the firefighters would steal. They would go in people's
Yeah,
houses and steal.
yeah. It's like, oh, it's a total loss. Except this pearl necklace, that's mine. So,
Not a total loss. Well, I really want to thank you, Lamar, for your time. It's been an incredible conversation. I mean, I feel like I've grown from it. I really, and I hope people listening and tuning in have as well. And in the future shares who have who see this will really do it. I mean, what you're doing is incredible work. I mean, the demystification of science, especially in our communities where our intelligence is constantly questioned.
right.
And not just by outsiders, but by ourselves. We question our intelligence. We
Yeah.
doubt our intelligence, and then that's the worst part. I mean, that's the most devastating part of all. And what you're doing is really really important. Are there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to tell us about? Anything that can follow up with the work you're doing?
Yeah, so like I mentioned with the mask, check out IG Cha Cha Covers if you're not familiar with that. Normally she does water slide nail decals, but right now she's doing masks. They're great. They got them in all sizes. Holler at her, tell them I sent you. Also, check my website out, namelessnation.com. I do music. Matt asked me if I want to do some performances today, but today was a very long day, and I just don't. Like, you would get the wackest, most lazy emceeing ever. It would be bad. So, and I still have to do paperwork after this as well too. So even if I did find it in my guts to like pull out some like little bit of strength and do a decent performance, I would pass out, and I can't pass out after this. I have to do more work. So it's the life of I don't know.
A physicist. You're a physicist.
Yeah, but it yeah. I miss performing though. I'm working on music now, like any good artist. Um, I think you guys will like some of my older stuff. Particularly, I did a mashup project where I took Jay Dilla beats with Selena Quintanilla's vocals. I never thought the day would come where I have to make the distinction between which Selena I'm referring to, right? But here we are, right?
Time,
But
time,
yeah, what's that?
time marches on.
Yeah, time marches on for sure. Yeah, so that's basically it. Check out my website. I got some of the other interviews I've done about the flat Earth stuff, music up there. So yeah, check it out. Namelessnation.com.
And so everyone knows that me and Lamar eventually are going to have a project together. We're promoting concept of Steam, right? So we talked
Right.
about that, and we're gonna revisit that.
Yeah, call it steam funk or something.
All right, thank you, everyone. Good
All
night.
right. Good night. Thank you.